Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Ina and today I have let's say a beginner's video. If you're not a beginner, probably I'll tell things that you already know, but if you want to see how I do these things, you can hang with me. Or if you're very new to the orchid hobby or you just got your first orchid, this video is probably for you. So let's introduce myself if you haven't watched any of the other videos. My name is Ina, as I mentioned before. I live in London, so my climate's not exactly hot. I have a pretty long winter. I don't have much natural lighting inside my apartment, so I live in a flat. I use more artificial lighting than I would like, but because I don't have natural light all year long here. I have an extensive collection of orchids, like I would say like more than 200 inside my apartment and some other houseplants. I'm originally from Brazil, and I think that's where my passion for plants come from. I grew up in a beautiful place in the Atlantic forest. So I grew up surrounded by plants and different types of trees, and I was also passionate about the environment and how to help to create a more sustainable way of living. So I think that's a little bit about my background. I have another video where I tell you my story. I will link it probably around here on the screen and also down below. I hope you enjoy this video. So let's start it. So what I'm gonna tell you today, if you have acquired your first orchid, I have already created a video about how to care for your first orchid. Probably it's a moth type of orchid or a Phalaenopsis, at least here in the UK and in Europe, and I think probably in other places as well across the globe. These are the most common type of orchids that you find in supermarkets, flower shops, so they are pretty affordable here as well. Lots of people have at least one at home. People love to give to them as birthdays or to wish you well, because they are gorgeous, they have different patterns of colors, and they also last very long. So I have already talked more about this type of orchids in the other video, and I will also link it here and also down below. But today I want to talk to you about how to repot your first orchid. I remember when I had my first Phalaenopsis, I didn't know how to take really good care of them, and I didn't know I need to actually repot them or how to repot them. So I went to the internet and started researching about orchids. That's when I learned a little bit more about how to repot these plants. So for the basics, again, I would advise you to watch the video that I'm linking here first, if you haven't watched it already, and then you come back here, because there I will talk about how these plants behave, what they need to grow well. So for you to know how to repot them, you first need to know how to look after your orchid and to know if that's a good time for you to repot, especially if you don't have experience yet. So I would advise you to go back, watch this video first and come back here. But if you have watched it already, if you know how to take good care, if you know a little bit more about these plants, today I'm gonna dive into the repotting and also after blooming care. As you can see here, I have a beautiful Phalaenopsis with me. So this one bloomed after winter, or maybe it was still winter, I think in January. This one bloomed for me, but then we had a heat wave. What happened is it got really dehydrated, and all the flowers died. So the spike died very fast, and they each decided to put new spikes, new flower spikes. And I usually cut the flower spike. I don't let the secondary spikes coming, but in this case, I knew to put a nice display again. And to be honest, I'm quite happy with my plant. I think it looks lovely, although it's the second spike. So that's the first thing that I want to say. And these plants, they branch out. So we have one spike full of blooms here, but they branch out. Like, I will give some close-ups, but basically I have a spike here, and this spike branched out and create a new set of blooms. You can leave your Phalaenopsis with the flower spikes for as long as they are alive. That's fine if that's what you want to do. If you want to see your plants spiking and spiking again and rebranching, lots of people prefer to do it. They can keep their spikes for a very long time, and other people prefer to cut the flower spikes and wait for the new spike in the next year. That's up to you, actually. A few advice. When I leave the spikes on, my personal experience, and that's how I do. As I mentioned, I knew that these flowers faded very fast and that it was already spiking. So I decided to keep. because I knew it would give me a new and fresh set of blooms, and I didn't have much time to enjoy the blooms that it had before. If I have, I'll also give you one close-up. Sometimes we can have some disease and things that affect the crown of the plant. I mentioned that in my other video. So that's the center of the plant. So if I have a crown rot and I know that my plant won't grow anymore, I leave the flower spike on because I know that I have more chance to produce baby plants with this spike. If I cut the spike, I may have a basal cake, that's a tiny baby that will sprout from the base, but the plant may die and don't give me any cake. So to have more chance of saving the orchids, I leave the spike on and I hope that they will create cakes, that's the baby plants. I'll definitely show you what I mean about these. You've probably seen some images now of cases where I lose the mother plants, but the spikes are branching out or the spikes are producing baby plants. These are the cases where I leave the spikes on. Most of the time, what I do is I wait for these plants to produce their blooms, and they will be amazing in my place, and I will enjoy them for many months. And when I see the flowers start to fade and everything, even if they are spiking, what I usually do, I cut the flower spike in the base, and I wait for these plants to rebloom next year. That's what I usually do. So I decided to cut the flower spikes and let the plant focus its energy on growing leaves and roots, and it will be my shelving. Wait for the next year. That's my personal preference. I think I have a new set of bloom. The plant will look fresh and nice in the following year. But as I said, a lot of people prefer to keep the spikes. So that's up to you. But if you notice that your plant is really unhealthy, the leaves are very dehydrated, they are very sad, the plant's not healthy, again, I would advise you to cut the flower spikes so the plants can retain energy and grow new roots and become a healthier plant again. So these are the few cases where I keep and where I cut the flower spikes. It's also a personal preference, but I would advise you to definitely cut it if you don't have crown rot or any other serious problems and you want to save your plant. I would definitely cut it to have a new set of blooms in the new year, but I also keep the spikes when, for example, I had a very short period of time with my flowers because I forgot watering it. So when the plant gets dehydrated, the blooms fade faster than what they probably would. So yeah, so that's some sort of things that I do to keep my plants healthy. So what I'm gonna do here, you have these beautiful spikes, they start fading. What I do, I cut the flower spikes. And that is what you probably should do if that's your first plant and you need to repot your plant. So you got the plant from the supermarket, it finished blooming or the blooms are going away. So before you repot your plant, I would advise you to cut the flower spikes. When you have your flower spikes completely gone, then it's when we should start repotting the plants. It's pretty warm, it's Saturday, hey! So we have lots of noise. What I would do before I start repotting the plant, I would water my plant. I would fill the container with water, let the plant soak for about, let's say, 15 minutes. I remove the plant from there and I repot it. Why? If you have no experience, the roots will be more flexible and the medium will leave the roots easier if you soak your plants before you repot. So my first tip here, actually my first one is cut the flower spikes, because if your plant becomes stressed with the repotting process, it will save energy instead of sending, spending energy on the flowers. So first thing, if you're a beginner, cut the flower spikes. Second thing, water your plant, leave it soaking for 15 minutes before you repot it. Okay, you go throw the water away and then we start the repotting. Before I show you, I'm going to repot a plant with you. I'm going to tell you what you need. So for this repotting today, what do you need to repot your first Phalaenopsis? That's what I use with my Phalaenopsis. Other people use different mediums. So Phalaenopsis are epiphyte plants, which it means it doesn't grow in soils. the roots grows in the air attached to trees, tree branches. So it needs lots of air around the roots. So no soil. Soil is very compact. Will probably stress your plant a lot. So you don't use soil when you're repotting your Phalaenopsis. If you have any airy medium, if you know how to deal with epiphyte plants, any pre-made mixture that you find in supermarkets, grocery stores, garden centers, you have this orchid mix. It's fine, you can use it. It's pretty airy. Okay, that's what I would advise you. But what I use, so that's my personal choice, I go with organic medium. So my mix is basically bark and sphagnum moss. Try to find a good quality of bark, the best that you can. Try to find bark in garden centers. You find bark like an orchid mix. Usually it's like bark prepared for your orchid, and also sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is a little bit trickier. I know that you can find moss here in garden centers. In the UK, you can find moss at B&Q. It's not the best quality. It's not my preferred moss, but I use that a lot. I usually go online. I have the links down below if you want to find some New Zealand sphagnum moss here. But that's what I do. So you need some mix. I usually use bark, sphagnum moss. You will need some, what I use as well, you can find it even at Wilco. That's called slow release fertilizer. You will need pot. You don't need to have a transparent pot. It can be any pot that you like. The transparent pot helps you if you're a beginner because you can see the roots growing and you can see if your plant has some roots or not. But they are more expensive usually than normal pots. So it's fine, you use the pots that you like. I use that just to shade it from lighting. So for example here, I don't have it in an orchid pot. That's just a cup, a plastic cup. It's fine as well. You see, the plant is healthy, it's producing many roots, it's producing lots of flowers. So, and the last thing that you need, it's a pair of scissors, a pair of pruners, something that you can cut the roots out. And this orchid has something that you can find most of the supermarkets here in the UK. Is what I think is the peon cherries or something that's very similar to it. It has mottled leaves and has fragrance, guys. This orchid, it smells really, really nice. I love it so much. So grab your tools and let's start repotting one orchid together. Shall we? So guys, this orchid, it was in bloom for many months. It has like a yellow with orange spots. It's a beautiful Phalaenopsis I found in a local garden center. I'm probably be giving you some close-ups of how these plants look like. But it came potted in like cocoa coir. I can see with bark, has a cocoa coir plug. Plug is the thing that you will find in the middle of the plant here. Most of them will come like that, or potted in bark, or in tiny little pots with moss, especially when the plants are very, very young. They always have like a plug of moss in the middle here. Plug is the thing that they use in nurseries for the baby plants, which is fine. So the first thing that you have to do with your Phalaenopsis is squeeze the pot, and you see the plastic pot here. You squeeze the pot, you remove your plant. As you can see, mine came out pretty quickly and it's full of roots, so it's a very, very healthy Phalaenopsis. And again, you will gently, very, very gently remove the old medium. As you can see here, the plant was wet already, so that's why it's coming very, very easily here. So you remove everything, gently, 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 to not disturb your roots. This plug is very easy to remove. When you have bark is a little bit harder. Sometimes it's attached to the roots. That's why I told you to soak your plant for like 15 minutes. At least everything will be soft and easy to remove. As you can see, my plant's very healthy. Why I'm telling you that it's very healthy? Because look at the amount of roots, and we have lots of root tips here, which means the plant is actively growing. These are the root tips. So what you should do when you remove all the media, you go to the sink and just water thoroughly the roots. remove the few bits of medium that you have in it, and then you return to your table to finish your repotting. I'll do that now, and I will come back with everything cleaned here and show you the next steps. So the next step on the process is you should inspect the roots to check which root is alive and which root is not alive. How I do it? So basically, it's not looking at the coloring, because some roots can be a little bit yellower if they are not exposed to the sunlight. And the ones that are green or greener, it's because they can photosynthesize. They have chlorophyll. That's why they green up a little bit. So for you to discover which root is alive or not, you gently press in the root, and if it feels mushy, all mushy, that means that the root is dead. So what you have to do in this case, you just cut this root. So I just cut one root here. I have one root tip here that is dead, but I don't want to stress the other one that is alive, as you can see. So this one is not the best example because it has an amazing root system. The plant is really, really, really healthy. But when you finish cutting the dead roots, it's time to see if it fits in on my pot. This pot has, don't know how many centimeters, maybe 12, I'm not sure. Looks like 12 centimeters. I start with moss on the bottom, because if I leave some water on the pot, on the container, it basically sucks out the water that is on the bottom, and I don't have a cold feet with my orchid. That's the reason why I do it. So I don't need to go and remove each excess of watering that I leave on my plant. But because I live in a cold place, I'm going to use much more bark than moss. My orchids, my Phalaenopsis, my Vandas, they are much happier in bark than moss, because it can get really cool and humid in winter. So I do use moss with many plants, but I avoid full moss with these plants because of this. Anyway, so what I'm gonna keep doing now, I'm gonna keep adding moss and bark until I finish the whole pot. And by the way, even using lots of bark, I water my plants once a week. My Phalaenopsis, they are drought tolerant, and here, as I said, it's not hot. So if I put too much moss, I can root rot my roots. So the roots may not survive. This happened before. So my experience now is to avoid using too much moss. So as you can see, I almost finished. I added a final layer of moss. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna use my slow release fertilizer here. Just a few beads. By the way, Phalaenopsis enjoy their fertilizer. So I would advise you, if you can, buy maybe a small bottle or a small container of slow release fertilizer if you don't have many plants. Otherwise, buy, as I said, everywhere like garden centers, they have ready-made fertilizer for orchids, at least maybe once a month. Fertilize your Phalaenopsis if you can, but look at the instructions of the fertilizer. It's very important to use the exactly dose or the exactly measure they recommend for you not to burn the roots or anything, especially if you don't have experience. That's what I would advise. And after the slow release fertilizer, I'm gonna end up, I will fill the whole pot until here where the roots are coming from, where the flower spike used to be. I would advise you not to pot it very deep into the pot, because these plants, remember, they grow in the air. So if you pot the stem, the central part of the plant, very deep into the pot, you can cause crown rot. because the water will touch the medium, and will touch the central axis of the plant. So as you can see, the flower spike is here, and I will add bark here until the top of these roots here. But I won't come any closer to the stem to avoid stem rot and then maybe crown rot. Mainly stem rot, that's even worse than crown rot. Anyway, just to tell you that, so be careful. Don't pot your plant really deep into the medium. You don't need to do that. But yes, let's finish this repotting. So the last thing that you should do is squeeze your pot a little bit, so the medium will fill all of the air pockets that we have inside the pot. Especially if you're using larger bits of bark, they tend not to fill all of the air pockets. They love air, but you have to be careful. If we have too much air in here, it may out dry so fast or all this kind of stuff. So we use mediums in mix in our favor. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just squeezing it for all the medium to fall into its place, because my moss is also dry, so we'll suck water. So as you can see, I still have some space here for some more medium. I'm gonna do that now. Yeah, and that's it. That's how you repot your plant. What I would advise you to do is, when you finish repotting it, just water it very well to avoid it to stress the plant even more. When we repot them, they become a little bit stressed because we're basically removing them from their home and putting them in another environment, you know? Biologically talking, even inside the pots, everything that the roots were used to, so they have to readapt. So offering it to water helps them not to stress out so much. So that's what I'm gonna do now, and I'm gonna come here to conclude this video. So guys, that was everything that I want to show you today. I have now this plant here in front of me. It's a very healthy Phalaenopsis, so fingers crossed it won't suffer any shock. But I think that's what I would advise you to do when you got your new plant from the supermarket, because organic medium lasts for about 2 years, but they start degrading and also affect the pH of the environment where the roots are, so it starts affecting the roots as well. That's why I think if you want to have healthier plants and they will reward you with more blooms, I would definitely advise you to repot your Phalaenopsis, your first orchid, as soon as the blooms are gone, as I told you. And then after you repot, give it a good watering. And what I'm gonna do with this plant now, I'm gonna place it with my other orchids under one of my shelvings. Now you take really good care. I will look into it, check if it's growing new leaves and new roots, and wait for the next winter for it to start spiking and giving me beautiful flowers next year again. I hope you have enjoyed this type of content. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel. It helps me a lot. If you have any other type of orchids that is not this one, it's not a Phalaenopsis, I have some other videos as well. I have one about Dendrobium, that it's a very common type of orchid, and I have some other repottings like Cattleyas, but I will definitely talk about Oncidiums and Oncidiums hybrids in the next video. I'll show you how to repot one as well. So if you are interested in this kind of content, please hang with me, and we'll keep talking about how to take care of these beautiful beasts here. And yes, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.